Hey YouTube, Stephen Gustin here. I hope everybody's having a nice snowy weekend potentially, or week. What day is it? I don't even know what day it is. I've been not doing too much. Weekend, okay. One thing I have been doing a lot of though is playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a little bit about me. So I'm from Kansas City. I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At a very young age. One time when I was young, my dad used to take me into the local card shop and buy me pretty nice stuff that some of it today would probably be valuable if it was in mint condition. And I was walking right alongside a pond at one of my family members' houses with my deck box in hand, and I dropped it in the water. And ruined a bunch of potentially super valuable old cards now. But I was just a collector at first, when I was a kid. We would, ruffle shuffle, and I don't even think I could ruffle shuffle, but no sleeves, nothing like that. But then I got more into the game. As I was in middle school, I played sports, but I got injured, so I got more into video games, and I got more into the Yu-Gi-Oh! And then the competitive side of it. Got to make friends, during that time. And I remember I first started playing during Teledad format. The first serious deck, semi-serious deck that I built was Six Samurai during Teledad format, and then I got into Light Sworns. I was never able to get a Crush card while it was legal, unfortunately. That card was, 200 to 300. The Gold Series reprint, at least, I bought. Every time I'd had store credit or something, I would get Gold Series and was never able to get it. But I was playing Light Sworn during Teledad. We used to have, 3 Necro Gardna, 3 Charge, and then even Plague came out near the end. But during real Edison format, that was I think, maybe right after Synchro Cat format. Shout out to Tyler Tabman, because he started playing during Synchro Cat format, and I was on the Synchro Cat deck by that time. Had figured, probably gotten a little bit better at the game. Not that it required a ton of skill, but his first game at a locals, I think it was his first game, he sits down and gets FTK'd and OTK'd by I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. And then during Edison, I was a little bit of a better player, but during those days, people were on more, Flamvel Cat type decks. People were trying to really use the rekindling stuff. I personally didn't think Black Wings were that good, because I played them with 3 Whirlwind and 3 Gale. It felt so crippled, but, time has shown that it actually is one of the strongest decks in Edison. But I wound up quitting Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit after, maybe like a year after Edison format. I did go to a couple nationals. I didn't really have any success during that time, as far as like big tournament success. During real Edison, I give all glory to God, I did top like a regional and a 1K with a Flamvel Firecat deck. I'm planning to maybe make a video about that deck list, kind of, blast from the past. But I just, besides maybe a short stint playing, a year or two ago online, barely at all, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Again about 5 months ago, on DB mostly. Started having fun, but unfortunately, I was trying at first to use my Flamvel Cat deck, and I think part of the reason that deck isn't very good, well, there's a couple things to consider. Is if you're on 3 Rekindling, Fire Dog, unless you mill it, it's not searchable. So those Rekindlings can really be dead at times. You need an attack to resolve to get the payoff, and then, Stardust is probably the best level 8 synchro, which is not impossible to get over. But I also think just, when you use a Rescue Cat in a Flamvel Cat deck, the payoff is not usually that high. Most of them, I don't think, even play the option to make a level 6, so you're using a Raikou and an Airbellum unless you have like a Monk or something. And basically you go into a Cataster and an Android and maybe get one out of their hand. It's just not a very strong payoff. But as I was grinding, starting to get on the DB ladder, I kept getting wrecked by things like Caius, like Raikou, and then also I was playing, it felt like over 50% of the decks I was playing 5 months ago were just some variant of frogs, and it was annoying. I didn't want to play against solitaire decks. I wanted to play an interactive game, you know, like the Caius stuff, you know, interactions, pluses, and, you know, a little more like GOAT format. But I think the format has really sped up a lot. You know, there's many games, it seems, where you win or lose within 2 or 3 turns, basically, sometimes maybe even 1. But it also has the potential to, you know, stretch out to a longer grind game. But I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, so we don't have Solemn Warning yet, so what card can help with Raikous, Caiuses, and, you know, things like, well, frogs. And then I find out that Gladiator Beasts, you know, has one particular card that, this is Gladiator Beast War Chariot, that's built into the engine that helps with Hamster, Raikou, Caius, and this is probably one of, if not Frog's, worst matchup. So I started playing GBs maybe 4 months ago. At this point, I've probably played around 600 games with these Glads on DB. Some people have played more, probably. Johnson Boss has played a lot of games. I would bet probably everything that I own here in this world that he's played more than me. But I don't think I'm the best GB player, but I have learned some things about the deck, and I kind of see the direction that the meta is taking going forward. And then some strategies as to how I am planning and trying to adjust to it and fix some of the deck's problems. And all glory to God, just I think yesterday I finally reached over 1,000 rating on DB Ladder, which, you know, it's, at least when I checked yesterday, that's within the top 200. So we'll get into the profile. I do play War Chariot, spoiler alert. Okay, so we'll start off, most GB deck profiles I see, they start off with, you know, just the GBs and then the other stuff. Mine's a little bit different. So I have, first off, my one of GBs, Secutor, and please forgive me for, you know, some things being higher rarity, some things being low rarity. Don't have a ton of money, but I have managed to get some nice cards, but other things like the common test tigers just doesn't look right. So one Secutor, some people don't play this, some people side this out. I think less people now. It's it can be, you know, a game-winning card. This, you know, GBs sometimes have trouble getting pluses and things, and this is with Rescue Cat, this is sometimes just a one-card Herc, and if you've already got like a Chariot and like a Laquari Engrave, I like calling that the super plus when you bring out, let's say with a Geyserus or with Secutor, you bring out Darius and Quest, you special summon the Laquari from the grave, and then you add the Chariot to your hand with the Quest, go into Herc. Very strong play if it resolves. One Murmillo, when I started off the deck, you know, it would be annoying when this guy would get deprisoned, so I've tried two. You know, I don't think it's the worst thing if you do play two, but one is standard. I'm on one. Another thing that can matter, that's kind of a benefit of these guys, is they do get under bottomless. So many people are on deprison though. One Rediari for a while, two in the main was standard. I do sometimes miss two in the main. We naturally do have a good matchup against frogs. I do side the second one. You know, the monster count is just so tight in these Glads if you're wanting to run the full engine that it's hard to fit the second one, if you see what I do. One Bestie, probably the most valuable Gladiator Beast in the deck. He gets you Geyserus. It's pretty cool how you can just set him or another monster in contact without a polymerization. You know, there's one Dark Arm Dragon, and you have to have 3 darks in the grave, and you can only bring them out usually once, pop up to 3 cards. But with Geyserus, you can practically, in this deck, bring them out much more frequently. So those are my one of GBs, and then these are what I like to call the broken one-ofs that are not officially GBs. And then I'll talk about this one a little bit extra. So Sangan, So the world's list, those guys are mostly, if not all, on 1 Stratos, 2 Prisma, and 1 Rhoda. I decided to cut the Rhoda for the Sangan. I think this is actually a really good card in GBs. It searches me my best card, my best monster in the deck, which is Rescue Cat. GBs sometimes struggle, like turn, if you're going second, your opponent sets a Raikou. Sometimes it's just annoying, you know, gives us another option with that. Stratos can do that, and Rhoda can search you another Stratos, but, you know, now that we're on the 3 trap stun and everything, kind of a max power GB style, especially if people know I'm on GBs, they don't usually, unless they know me, they don't usually expect the Sangan, and just setting Sangan with like a trap stun behind it, getting a cat with a trap stun follow-up next turn has been so strong for me. Also, if you already happen to hypothetically have the cat in your hand, you can search Test Tiger or even like Bestie, and then also side deck cards like DD Crow, it's a great card. And then Rescue Cat, you know, I play a higher card count. That's the thing about GBs, because of the tight the monster ratios. It's hard to play the full engine and get to 40. And if you think about it, you know, I think part of the reason, if not the main reason, people try and keep it to 40 is because they want to see their broken 1-ofs more often, like Heavy Storm, Trap Death Shoot. With Gladiator Beasts, obviously Heavy Storm can be nice, but with the version I'm on, Trap Stun's heavy. I also play Cold Wave. I'm playing 5 cards that are like Heavy Storm. You know, Heavy's probably the best card out of those, but you know, the other ones can do similar, if not in certain situations, better things. And I like being able to play my full toolbox. I'm not 100% on this build. This isn't the exact build, you know, I've tweaked it many times over the last 6 months. 1 Stratos, this is one of the cards that I do have max rarity on. That's a Starlight rare one. It's awesome, you know, sometimes just having a high attack guy. This deck can struggle, like if your opponent starts with Stratos, it really just doesn't feel good if you burn a Test Tiger to Murmillo a Stratos, especially if you get like deprisoned or something, that you know they got a plus after. That helps with that. Another thing that GBs struggle with is like we don't really have defensive sets generally. Sangan helps with that, and Stratos, another option with that. And then it searches a great card that really increases the power level of GBs, which is Prisma. Getting into the 2-ofs here, you can do all kinds of cool combos with this. And shout out to Morph, he's maybe one of the best, if not the best, I don't know, GB player right now, super high rated on DB. He gave me the idea to put Sandwich in my extra for Sangan. I've never used it, but don't have it in person currently, but you know, with Call of the Haunted, that could potentially get me a cat search, which is pretty cool. But you know, the main combo is you go Prisma, reveal Geyserus, send Bestiary to the graveyard, his name becomes Bestiary, you special a Test Tiger, use Test Tiger's effect, send him back into the deck, grab Darius, Darius gets Bestie from the grave, and then you have a Geyserus. Now into the 2-of GBs, so 2 Samnite, especially on my build where I'm prioritizing more cat usage. You want your cat to be live, and then there's other scenarios where, like, let's say you go, especially now that people know that Trap Stun is such a hot card, more people are playing things like Book of Moon to try and play around it. Sometimes, like, let's say your opponent has 3 back row and you don't want your cat to get solemn, so you decide to preemptively Trap Stun. If you were to go hypothetically, you know, Samnite and then Test Tiger, and then use Test Tiger's effect and bring out Secutor, that's potentially a higher value play. However, it gets crushed by Book of Moon. You just wasted cards. You're probably going to lose if your Secutor gets Book of Moon there. But what you can do with 2 Samnite is get 2 Samnite out, swing. Even if one of them gets Book of Moon, you can tag the one that got the attack off into Bestiary, pop one of the back rows, and then contact, even with the face down Samnite, into a Geyserus, pop everything. Tui Quest. This is the one that at the most recent LDS, the higher level GB players decided to cut this instead of the second Darius. I agree. I think it's hard to play. I mean, Chase Simpson won Worlds with one Darius, with 2 Prisma, Stratos, and a Rhoda. But I think a general decent rule of thumb for GBs is you match the number of Darius with the number of Prisma. And then Murray made a good point recently in one of his videos. It's like when you get punished for not having 2 Darius, you're probably going to lose, but it's a different type of being punished. But if you only have one of these and don't have access to it, but you know, I like 2, so my build is trying to play 2 of each of these guys, which you do, you know, to keep the monster count within, you know, overdrawing monster territory. Probably gonna have to play over 40, especially if you're on this stuff. But I think this stuff, you know, this increases the power of the deck, and this, you know, adding this plus Cold Wave gets me almost 2 times more Rescue Cat and almost, you know, 2 times more Heavy Storm-like card. 2 Laquari, that's pretty standard. He's the other one that you search with Prisma. Let's say you don't want to dump Bestie in the graveyard, or you want to set up, you know, like an Equest or a Darius play. It's, you know, sometimes you'll just start off with Prisma, send Laquari, and you'll hopefully be able to get a plus off of that later. And the last monster, 3 Test Tiger, just the standard gas of the deck, combos well with Prisma. That's another thing about Gladiator Beasts, why it probably matters less that we play over 40, because as long as you draw like a Test Tiger and a GB, that can get you Secutor access. So it's not necessarily, besides like Rescue Cat, for example, or like Prisma Tiger, or like Stratos early on, there's not really specific cards that you're like, okay, I want to see this card, you know, I mean, yeah, it would be nice to open up Heavy Storm or Cold Wave with Cat and then Prisma Tiger every game. But in order for all that to function well and, you know, go into late games without, you know, lacking your toolbox, this is what I'm on right now. I might change it, but I think the LDS winning Murray's deck and Jake Mattern as well were both on 44 cards, so proven success with over 40 card builds when it comes to Gladiator Beasts. And Johnson Boss says I think he's in the past he's normally run 43, so I'm on a higher number. I don't really want to say, but you'll see. So spells, Cold Wave. Here's why I play this. So one problem with Cold Wave and Gladiator Beasts is we really like back row, and a lot of our monsters are weak, so they sometimes greatly benefit from having back row support, or they'll just die. So sometimes you'll Cold Wave, and let's say you build a huge board and you've already got back row set, and then your opponent just black roses you and you can't use your set Chariot because you're under Cold Wave. You have to be careful with this card. However, some of the reasons that I decided to run Cold Wave is there are games sometimes where you're up, let's say your opponent has a Neos Alias and 4 back row set. How are you gonna do anything, you know what I'm saying, without like a miraculous Heavy Storm going through, a trap stun resolving somehow, or, you know, something like that. Having the Prisma Tiger build, with more Sangan access, with more Rescue Cat access with the Tiger, you know, this is kind of a max power GB build. I think it's nice having another Heavy Storm-like cards that can help us in those tough matches. One thing that somebody else said also is if you play Cold Wave, it's nice to make sure that you have some kind of a follow-up. But, you know, in a situation where they have like Alias 3 back row or 4 back row, and then let's say one of them Starlight Road and they don't have Solemn, this is one of the only cards that you're going to be able to actually like do stuff against that with. Heavy Storm. Be careful a little bit because people tend to side in Starlight Road against us. Sometimes, you know, if I'm like sure they have Road, I might try and resolve a trap stun if I have both before doing this and do a bunch of back row. One Smashing Ground. Sometimes it's nice to just out a Titanial or an Absolute Zero or a Blackwing or something without running into the Icarus. One Shrink. It's nice to have a little bit of variety. So this can, you know, hypothetically can't think of off the top of my head a single time I've ever done this, but hypothetically, this can help out like a Stardust, right? Whereas if it were a Book of Moon, like you have a Quest and a Shrink, that you can attack over the Stardust and use Shrink. But with Book of Moon, you would have to, you can't really out the Stardust with a Book of Moon and a Quest, just those two. Other ways that this is good is, let's say you go into a Geyserus, pop 2 back row and they chain bottomless. You can chain Shrink and it doesn't get bottomless, and you can continue attacking instead of just saving it with Book of Moon and not being able to attack with it. And then you can do similar stuff with Bestie or any GB. So generally 3 Book of Moon is standard. Some of the, maybe you'll think I'm terrible if you're a GB pro, but some of the theory behind my building this deck is I am trying to kind of cut down on the inherent -1s. Like Book can do, it's such a versatile card, and you know, it goes well with the Gladiator beasts, you know, help us with our small monsters get over stuff. You can, you know, save Bestie with it, and there's a lot of cool tricks you can do with Darius. Like if you use Darius's effect, bring back Bestiari. Not 100% on this, but I think either way, if like, let's say they bottomless Darius or Bestie, if you chain Book of Moon to either Darius or Bestiari, the Bestiari is going to get his effect to pop a back row in Edison. But it is an inherent minus, and sometimes like you have 2 of this, maybe if you have 2 of this, you just rather it be something else. So not 100% on that, but that's what I've been playing with. And then now onto the traps. Call of the Haunted. This is generally standard in Gladiator Beasts. It's actually something I have thought about cutting, because if you draw it early, you don't have anything in the graveyard. You know, it takes a turn to set up, and you might just get blown out, you know, if you with it, and could be another D-Prison hypothetically or something. But this card synergizes so well with like Prisma, with Geyserus. It's nice. I mean, even if your opponent outs and kills a Herc, you can bring back a Herc for free. You can use Cat again, and then this build, my particular build, has extra synergy with it, with the Sangan and the Stratos. So it is a good card, but I am considering maybe cutting it. Here's one of my spicy techs. This is Magic Drain. So GBs is a deck that you like setting 2 or more back row, ideally all the time. And that's one problem with this deck, is just losing to Heavy Storm. This is a card that it can do different things than Starlight Road. One time, you know, I set it turn 1 and I'm playing against Lightsworns and they try a solar recharge on me, they pay a cost. I use this and then they're just -1 and I didn't have to do anything. It allows me, you know, I can, with 3 trap stuns, you know, you want to set up your trap stun, you can set Magic Drain and stun. Another cool thing about this is they can MST the trap stun, and then you can actually choose to protect it with this, and it might protect your trap stun. I've tried Dark Bribe before, but the problem with Dark Bribe is, even if they would go Heavy Storm and I would go Dark Bribe, it's an inherent minus. The card advantage that my opponent would get off of that would give them too many resources to even out something like a Heraclinos. And I didn't like it. But I think GB decks have had success with Dark Bribe in the past. But I think, like with GBs, it's kind of a deck you want to whittle your opponent down on resources with, and then it's usually the mid to late game that we're able to get our pluses and stuff, because early game, when we don't have anything in the graveyard, your opponent doesn't have anything in the graveyard, some of our monster effects are kind of useless. 1 Starlight Road, it's actually a cracked card. Protect yourself from heavy and get a free Stardust. That's great. This is a deck that wants to set a bunch of back row. I would probably play 2 if it couldn't get Royal Oppression, at least. But it also, you can protect your monsters. This is a deck that you want to be generally swinging with, like around, you know, two or so monsters. So it can stop a Mirror Force, a Torrent, something like that, a Black Rose. It's a great card, but I wanted less dead cards to Oppression. It's super good against Blackwings. So if you're playing a deck that doesn't lose to Oppression, that Blackwings are probably not going to side Oppression into you, I recommend siding this against Blackwings, because their Icaruses are one of their strongest cards. Probably a big reason why they've had so much success. But since we have so many inherent weaknesses when it comes to Oppression, I have 1 in the main and none in the side. And then Solemn Judgment. Another card that can protect. Back during Teledad days, Glads were, so Teledad was like tier 0, Glads were tier 1. It was a really strong deck, maybe 1.5, but they had 3 Solemn Judgment at the time, so they could easily set, go Laquari set 4 all the time. We had guys that played at our locals, shout out to Kevin and Paul, that was always a difficult game. But you can use this to protect from Heavy Storm. You can use it to stop a normal summon on Black Wings if you absolutely need to. You can use it to make sure a cat goes through, things like that. Torrent, this is a card that, Torrential Tribute, it's a card that normally is one of the staple traps that sometimes Glads don't play because we like having our board presence, but from my experience, especially like early to middle on when I was grinding ladder with this deck, going up against these hyper aggressive value players, and so many times I'm just like, man, if my back row right now were just Torrent, you would just lose. And this card I've resolved for big board busts many times. Your Glads tend to die anyways. I recommend playing it. Mirror Force, similar card. Here's something that some people might think I'm bad for, but there's theory behind it. So I'm on 1 bottomless trap hole. Space is really tight in the Glad deck. Here's the problem with bottomless. So if you're, top decking and you're middle game and your opponent is just beating you down with a Sirocco, this isn't going to do anything for you, at least immediately. Whereas a deep prison, this is better to draw at any point. It's always probably going to be useful. I do side the second one to put in against decks like Black Wings and Light Sworns, and bottomless is better when you go first and put it early. But if your opponent had, another thing to consider is how people play against Glad Beasts. People just like posting up like a Stardust, for example, against us and just sitting. So I know it's generally a staple at 2. I'm not 100% on this. Maybe I'll switch it back to 2, but there's other cards that I'm trying to fit in as well. You would think I'm on 3D Prison, but currently I'm only on 2. It's a good card, but here's where some more of the spice comes in compared to what is standard in Glads. So currently, I'll tell you, so for a while I was at 45. I wasn't playing any of these, but I decided to put 2 in, just try it out. There's theory behind it. So 47 cards, 2 Yadas. With these Yadas, combined with these guys, every game I want to start off with pretty much 2 or more back row, and I don't want to lose to Heavy Storm. I want protection for my back row. I don't want to lose to MST. This deck can lose to MST if they hit the right one. I don't always like setting 2 with no protection. So this gives me a large, so this, even though it ups playing 2 of these ups my count from 45 to 47, it's almost like 45, makes potentially siding easier, but I don't want to necessarily side these out and make my deck, 46 or 47. Probably doesn't even matter as much as people make it out to be, but, all glory to God, I've gotten to 1,000 with mostly around 45, 46 card decks on DB, which is not the highest rating, but testing this out so that more of my starting hands have some form of back row protection. People don't expect this in Glads. It's great into Ryko. Free pluses I was just thinking about it. A thought came to my mind recently. Glads don't get a lot of free pluses. We kind of have to earn them through the battle phase and stuff like that. So it's nice to potentially, MST, oh, it's a Yada free plus. But mostly the thought behind putting this in is potentially free plus, but also just more back row, allowing me to set more, protect my real stuff, like my trap stuns, so that they resolve. 2 Compulse, part of me really wants to play 3, but it's an inherent minus and going by my rule. But, Stardust can be tough for us to out. It's great against 0, it's great against Vayu. It's very flexible, if you just want to make sure a Secutor resolves, you can bounce like a set monster or something if you don't have a Chariot. You can, if your opponent brings out Brio and they discard 1, target this, it's a good feeling. But this is a great card in Glads. You know, you can use it to stop brain control plays. You can, you know, out big synchros that people try and post up against us. And then here's part of the reason I'm only on one bottomless. So right now I'm on 2 Waboku. So partly this might be a bad time for this because of how Gladiator Beasts are more successful, and this is not the ideal trap card for the mirror match. It's not completely dead actually, but something that I noticed when I was playing is, wow, like just leaving a Secutor on board with one of these, like they pretty much need like a Raikou to resolve or like a Brio to stop that, you know, from Secutor resolving. And like, you know, you might think of like, I think Johnson, Boss, and Simpson say, you know, Herc Chariot Victory formation, but if you have a Herc Secutor Chariot Waboku, even if they out the Herc, it's like that's more of a victory formation. And then in the mirror match, something to think about if you do play this and wind up in a mirror match is if let's say your opponent has an Quest and you have like a set ready Ari and they attack into it and you Waboku, that's probably going to force them to tag into a Murmillo to pop your guy if they don't have a Geyserus play or a Tiger play that they're wanting to do, which allows you to potentially attack over that Murmillo next turn with which is easy to do. So typically they don't want to, it just forces them to go into Murmillo potentially. But I think it's good against everything else, especially with like Gigavise and the way people play against Glads, which is usually hyper aggressive and just trying to kill us fast. You know, one time I was playing a match against one of my friends and he heavied his own oppression to go for game. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. And I just chained this and was able to come back. So 3 trap stun, it's like a free cold wave that you don't have to not be able to set your own back row with. People are catching on to it though, you know, more people are on things like 7 Tools, Book of Moon. I really like 7 Tools, I just don't feel like I have room for it right now, and you know, you can just do so much if you already have a GB on the board especially, or like a cat, you know, two attacks, one of them being tagging into a Bestiari, you know, Geyserus. Especially if you can get like a double Geyserus play with Prisma. The way you do a double Geyserus would be, let's say you already have a GB on board, and you normal summon Prisma, send Bestie, you can immediately go Geyserus without the Darius, and then after going into Geyserus and attacking, you can tag out for another Darius and go into another Bestie. Tough for this deck to play into 4 back row without this. And then lastly, 2 Chariot is standard, but since I'm on the higher card count, I see Chariot more often than the guys that are on 42, 43, but being higher than that, I double up on it a little bit less. You know, some people are like, oh, well, if you draw 2 against Black Wings, it's going to hurt you. Potentially, you know, depends on what your other cards are. But here's the deal, like if you go into Herc without this, or like a Book of Moon, he's pretty easy to out. All it takes is like a Raikou or a Brio or something. But another great thing about this card is, let's say I were to set something like War Chariot. Let's say these were my starting back row and I decided to set all of them. Even if my opponent, let's say they heavy storm me, which, you know, probably, I think it's around, I don't know exactly what percent your opponent will start off with heavy in a 40 card deck, but playing this deck, it feels higher than it should be, but praise the Lord anyways. But let's say you set these 3 face down, your opponent heavies, and then you go Magic Drain, which forces them to discard a spell card for the heavy to resolve. Let's say they do discard a spell and this resolves. So if it were 2 cards right here, that would just be going even straight up. But here, it looks like a -1 for me, but having that Chariot engrave, it gets me my engine rolling a little bit, so I'm able to get it. It's a little bit less of a risk when you lose the Chariot early on because you're generally able to get it back. So you can sometimes just set Chariot when you're set more cards, it's not as big of a loss. That's another thing about you notice I'm on the Wabokus, the Magic Drains, the Chariots, things that lose less to Heavy Storm. It's just nice to not take free losses, you know. Another really cool thing, back to the Magic Drain thing, is Like, people do not see this coming at all. I've resolved it on a burial that would have potentially allowed my opponent to come back in the game. You already heard about Solar Recharge. A lot of decks only play a small amount of spells, and the ones that they do play are super broken, like Heavy Storm, Brain Control, Miracle Fusion. Those are the cards that Glads usually lose to, especially now that Trap Stun meta, more Book of Moons, My Body things. This is a nice card to have. And then, though the picture on it looks pretty evil, I don't like that part about it. But over to the extra now, which I'm just going to run through it. It's, you know, with Glads, here's the important ones. The 3 Geyserus, 3 Chariot. I've never gone into 3, or 3 Heraclinos. I've never gone into 3, but if a Secutor sits there, it's certainly possible. 3 Chimera Tech, 2 Cyber Dragon in the main with the Prismas, and with Call of the Haunted, it's actually possible to go into 3. I think Jake Mattern says that he has. 2 Stardust. 1 would probably be fine, but, you know, the rest of these are pretty much just if I ever get creature swap. This one, sometimes, you know, Glads are actually a deck that are capable of running things like Miracle Fusion or Super Poly. You know, could be an absolute 0 in here too. And then the Armor Master, you know, Gale is probably the most common tuner that people play, so, and level 4 is the, but I don't think I've ever gone into any of these without, or this. Sometimes I have sided Super Poly, so I have gone into this before. My opponent had like a Machina Fortress and a Stratos, and I Super Poly into this, which was nice. And then the Kaiba token, Kaiba Corp and Kansas City Royals logo looks practically the same. Look it up. So Kansas City, that's why I have this. It's my Gores token. And then I'm missing a sandwich so that I can maybe do the Prisma Sangan play. And then the side deck, which I think this is another very important part. So here's that second bottomless, you know, if I'm going first against a deck that it's good against, or just probably always against, maybe always against Black Wings and Lightsworns, decks like that. My Body, Lightsworns in the mirror match, you know, the Trap Stun, Stop a Geyser's play, going second against, you know, some decks. It's I really think it's a cool card. I have a really cool story one time when, you know, when Black Wings had 3, I was on Black Wings when they were on 3 Whirlwind, 3 Gale, and praise the Lord, I was able to get, my opponent was greedy. They set up a Crush card turn 1, but they waited for me to summon to activate it, so I go Whirlwind, and he's like, and he thought for a minute, he's like, all right, and then I summon Shura, and then he goes Crush card, and then I go My Body, and he lost. MST, this comes in against every deck that I know is going to bring an oppression against me. It's unfortunate. I'm not fully able to side out back row hate against Lightsworns because now all of them side oppression, and if they put up something like a Celestia with an oppression, that can be super difficult for us. So I'm still trying to find the right balance on that. Soul Release, I'm probably going to switch this for a second BD Crow, but it is really good. It was such a good feeling one time in a matchup with Frogs, like I wasn't able to get my Ready Ari rolling, and I was able to just Soul Release, get rid of all the Treeborns, and then I think I chose Substitoad, but probably Swap would be a better choice. Like leaving the dupes and the Substitoads. Swap's probably more valuable than the other two even without Treeborn, but it's really good against Lightsworns too, potentially, if you get it at the right time, and against Twilight, since they're on a lower Lightsworn count. I didn't have a ton up for Lightsworn in here, that's why that's in there, so probably second Crow. Brain Control, that's exclusively, I think, for the mirror, in case I ever want to just, you know, bring it in to have it for a potential game shot if I'm feeling spicy. Really good card in the mirror because you're able to brain their GB and tag. It goes back to their deck, but you tag into your GB, so you can get some serious pluses with that, especially if they go double Laquari, trying to wall you out from being able to get an attack off, and you brain and crash them both. Crushing play. Gores, it's really good against Vayu, and then also like OTK decks like Gigavies or Forgs. Consecrated Light, just one. This card can solo Black Wings. Herc Consecrated is super strong. It does stop us from going Geyserus though. So right now I'm on 1. 1 Crow, probably going to go to 2. Part of the reason I'm planning to go to 2 probably, and it's probably better than Soul Release generally, because you can stop your opponent's plays on their turn, stop avarices, whereas soul release is like inherently usually a -1, unless you get rid of like Vayu and Sirocco that they used resources to put in there. But I don't even really cite it against Vayu, because usually against me they just bring their stuff out immediately. But with this, they can go stack for plague and you can stop it. You can stop avarices. Against Gigavies, I sometimes don't even bring it in, but maybe I should. Second Ready Ari for mostly just frogs, but maybe like Vayu and Lightsworn as well. So, probably Lightsworn. And then here's another spicy side card. So this used to be like Sirocco and Kaiku, but something I was thinking about, this deck can get soloed by Oppression, but it can also lose if we have too many trap stuns and not enough other like real back row as far as like battle traps. So I've decided to start siding 2 Raikou because it can deal with big monsters, which this deck can have problems with. You don't like using a Test Tiger just to Murmillo a Sirocco, but I think I'm planning to try bringing this in against all the Oppression decks, because it gives me a more flexible out to Oppression that I can use for other stuff if I already have good back row removal. People won't expect this in Glads either. Surprise factor is a big thing. And then here's maybe the favorite spicy tech, Morphine Jar number 2. This card is busted. It bounces things like Synchros and Fusions for free. It just is like a compulse to those. The worst case scenario, I guess, is like, or one of the bad scenarios is if you put this in, let's say against Vayu, and then they do you send back a regular monster, so they mill, and then like a Raikou comes out, but you'll know it's there, it's not game losing. But what is game losing is when your opponent establishes a Gigavies board against you with a Stardust and a Titanial, or like a 0 and a Stardust. That's really hard for this deck to beat. So this card can out that practically for free. Basically what it does is when it resolves, all the monsters on the field get shuffled back into the deck. So Synchros go back into the extra deck, monsters go back into the main deck, and then your opponent gets to mill, depending on how many monsters were shuffled back into their main deck, so they don't get any first Synchros. They mill, like if they have 2 monsters shuffled back into the main deck, they'll mill until they hit 2 monsters, and then if they are level 4 or lower, they get special summoned and face down defense, which can set up a Secutor play. It can really, it's an emergency. Like I've gotten so many, I busted, praise the Lord, one time a board of 0, Stardust, Brio, and Mystic Tomato. With this card, normally Glads cannot probably overcome that board. Even if you go Geyserus, Stardust, you can't, you're cooked usually. But great card. It feels like an engine piece. It's basically like a giant Compulsion Book of Moon that sets up a potential Secutor next play. 2 Cyber Dragon, really good in the mirror and against machines, pretty standard. Sometimes, pretty much everyone sides this in against me. So I might start siding it against like almost everything, putting 1 in with the Prismas and stuff. But what is unfortunate is, people also usually always side in Oppression. So, I mean, it could be nice to just get the Oppression out in the open if you don't have the out for it with this. But, it keeps machines in check, having the Chimera thing. One thing I do want to talk about, kind of some of the theory that I'm trying right now. So people know that the Prisma Glad build is what's winning lately. So I've had people side in Crow against me. If somebody gets a DD Crow off against you, you're going Prisma Tiger into Darius, trying to target Bestie in the graveyard, and they Crow that can be game losing for you. You lose your Bestie and potentially, your ability to overcome a strong board. So I'm trying not to rely on that super heavily post side. It sucks because, Prisma's super strong. That's a super strong combo. But what I've been doing is going into my side, unless I'm like pretty sure they don't side DD Crow against me, is I have been taking out 1 Darius and 1 Prisma for like 2 jars. And now that I'm on the Raikou stuff, maybe it'd be like 1 jar, 1 Raikou, unless it's like Gigavies or something. Just for these 2, and then it does suck if you draw Stratos and only have 1 Prisma in deck. I know Chase Simpson only had 1 Prisma, 1 Stratos in his recent, unless it was posted wrong. So it's possible to run that, because Prisma, even if you draw them both, Prisma can go back into the deck, or you can try and get Stratos's popping effect off. It's another reason why Wabaku, I think, is better in this build, because if you can keep a Prisma on board, you know, that can give you a free guys next turn or a Stratos pop or something. We like keeping our monsters on board. I'm not sure though, like there are times where I have not been able to come back because I only had one, so I might switch this for a quest. That's what they've been doing when I side into this stuff. And here's the other thing, just to talk a little bit more about this card. People that know me in the Yu-Gi-Oh community know I really like the card. You know, even if your opponent is just beating you down with a Sirocco, it's not so bad just setting this so that you don't have to out it with, if you don't have a D-Prison or something, not having to use a D-Prison or like a Test Tiger, being able to just get that Sirocco off board. They might mill a higher level monster and not get anything, or they might summon another Synchro and you get just a big, you know, plus off of it, basically. Other things you can actually do with this, you can use this on your turn. Unless I'm wrong, the way this is ruled, you flip this over, it shuffles itself back into the deck. It's kind of like a reset for you. You can flip everything and your opponent has them to face down defense. Let's say summon like a GB and a Tiger, or you can like there's all kinds of, I think this is a really broken, unexplored card. But thank you for watching. This video is probably pretty long, but I'm planning to maybe, you know, post Edison content on here. I really like Tengu format. There seems to be, I think the main Tengu YouTube guy stopped, so I like that format. I might try getting into that a little bit, maybe GOAT. And I might post other stuff. I'm a Christian. I might post stuff just about the Lord sometimes. But thank you for watching. Take care.